Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Daily Friends Show. It's another great week in South Africa. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and today I'm joined by Mr. Michael Morris. Michael, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Nick. Nice and sunny in Cape Town. We're getting a sense of change of season coming up.
Indeed. Summer is slowly creeping towards us, and you can almost smell the spring in the air. Not quite yet, but
you can.
Yeah. Sarah gone, of course. Sarah, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm starting. You can already start to, two things. You can smell the move to spring, and the color of the light is different. It's different to a winter light.
Yes, no, actually, that's a strange thing. I do agree. And of course, we had a funeral of our beloved colleague, John Kane Berman, on Thursday, which is why we didn't have a show. And it was great to meet a couple of fans and listeners of the show at that funeral, which was, it was very pleasant. It was a sort of a gathering of the kind of liberal family, and it was a lot of interesting, fun people to be there, and a nice service. I thought so very much. And that is today why, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice I'm not so casually dressed as I usually am, because I felt that to honor John, I had to dress properly, as he was a stickler for that kind of thing. And so that is why I'm wearing a suit and tie. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get into the news of the week. So our first thing is that there has been a lot of buzz recently about the West Rand and the problem of zamazamas, or illegal miners, as they are known in English, after the alleged rape of a huge number of models who were apparently shooting a music video on the West Rand. There has been an outpouring of outrage from people in the West Rand and the country in general, as this was just so sort of brazen and over the top. The story goes, of course, I'm sure everyone's heard it by now, that while shooting a music video, a group of armed men approached these women and proceeded to gang rape them. And as a result, there is much running around with heads on fire and many aggressive speeches being given by South Africa's politicians, promising that law and order will be restored in the West Rand. Police Minister Becky Cele says reinforcements will be sent to West Village in Krugersdorp to fight the illegal miners. On Sunday, Cele and the Gauteng Premier David Makura visited the area for a community in Bizo, and they were told by people there that the gangs of illegal miners, the zamazamas, are terrorizing them. Cele says he has ordered a full SAPS cleanup in the West Rand. He went on to say no community must be prisoners of crime and ruthless criminals who act with impunity. Residents have the right to feel safe and sleep at night. This is why SAPS must be seen and must be felt, while the sealing off of mines is expedited by those responsible. The National Police Commissioner said, "We will respond through action as the police. We will deploy the highly trained TRT, the Tactical Response Team, the NIU, the National Intervention Unit, the Special Task Force, and the K9 teams to make sure we flush out all undesirable elements in this area. Whoever comes with fire will be met with fire." Residents have also called for the army to be deployed, and there is some talk that that may in fact be done. However, Becky Cele said that this would take some time to do. In the meantime, SAPS would be there in full force to crush the illegal miners. We've also seen the local community punishing people who are suspected of being zamazamas in the area, often with, shall we say, not exactly a soft hand. Quite brutal punishments. There's also been attempts by people in the community to seal off mine shafts and basically trap zamazamas underground to kill them. So it's gotten, shall we say, quite Wild West out in the West Rand there, which is not terribly surprising. But there's just something that really has irked me about this entire response from government, and that is the fact that a lot of people, civil society, the DA, various groups have warned government for years that the illegal mining problem was a serious one, that these gangs were not Mickey Mouse operations, that they were hardcore dudes with access to weapons. They were tough, and they were fighting each other and terrorizing the locals. They're running in some parts of Soweto still. And I find it difficult to believe that the police do not, in fact, know this. Massive refining operations. If you go to that area, sort of on the north of Soweto, between Old Joburg and Soweto, you can find Zama camps there refining gold. And this really feels to me like a kind of management by crisis. Nothing is done, nothing is done, nothing is done. Then suddenly there's a massive, horrific media event, and government runs around with its hair on fire saying, no, we're going to fix it, we're going to fix it, don't worry, we're taking it very seriously now. I wonder whether anything is really going to change, though. Michael, what do you make of all this?
I absolutely agree with your summing up there. I mean, in a sense, it's chiefly a problem of economics and of mining. The formal mining industry has been radically undermined by a succession of legislation, a succession of regulatory interventions by the government, the insistence by the government that it knows what's best for this really founding sector of the South African economy. It's not as big as it used to be, but it nevertheless is hugely important. And in this environment, part of this, it's not as if Zama is a result of the things I've just described, but part of it is this intrusion into the sector of kind of cowboy capitalists, but they're quite significant. We had a presentation in the liberal community quite recently by somebody who had huge insight into this, has spent a lot of in the legal sphere and spent many years looking at it. And as far as I recall, Sara, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to recall he's saying that 25% of South Africa's gold exports come from the Zama. So right. Clearly it's symptomatic of much more than simply a crisis in Krugersdorp or Krugersdorp, whichever it was, I forget for a moment. It's not simply a crime thing, and the criminal expression of it is obviously the thing that we need to deal with briskly, sensibly, and so on. I'm sure that, as you say, Nick, this kind of cowboy approach is not going to do the trick, but it nevertheless it's a criminal issue that needs to be very firmly dealt with in a way that we're not entirely sure that Bekele can do. But beyond it is this much greater issue of the state of mining, the state of the extent to which the economy is taken over or is prone to these, or vulnerable to these enormously mercenary players. We see it in the construction industry with bribes and threats and violence and so on. This is another instance, and it's symptomatic of the kind of breakdown of all these quite fundamental protections that the government, in fact, is no longer capable of providing, sensible regulatory measures. And instead, they're focusing on all the things, the regulatory measures that we don't actually need, the private sector, mining in particular.
So one of the things that really also annoys me about this is how this has happened often in Law and Order, where the ANC is found to be napping on law and order. As we know, over the last, the ANC had some success during the 2000s in reducing crime from the high point of the 90s. But since around about 2010, crime has continued to generally get worse, and that seems to have accelerated in recent years. And the response always seems to be, no, don't worry. We're just going to go at this with very aggressive rhetoric. So we've had a police minister saying that the police must grab criminals by the balls and squeeze them, crush them, that you must shoot to kill, that you must take a very hard approach to crime, which sounds good and is very popular. And here again, we see it. Whoever comes with fire will be met with fire. Be a cleanup of undesirable elements. And yet, our conviction rate for murder remains below 20%, as far as I understand. And the police remain under-resourced. And despite the deployment of these tactical response units, the specialized units remain disbanded for the most part. Sara, what do you make of all this?
Just to say that the conviction rate is not a bad one, but remember that you're looking at only the people who have been caught and charged and appeared in court. So our conviction rate of people who commit murder is very, very low. I mean, there's one function of the state above all that needs to be in place for the citizens. That's what the citizenry elects people to do, and that is to protect. And of course, what's happened is, like everything else, the police force is a shadow of its former self in terms of competence, ability, and numbers of competent people. I'm not sure if we've ever had a good police. Well, we may have had a few good police ministers in the early days, but we certainly haven't probably for the last 20 years. And Gail is no different. I mean, he is just, he kind of tries to make up in rhetoric what he lacks in the authority to actually discipline the police force and structure it properly and get it going. I mean, the task would be huge. And all that these guys have done, the Zamazamas, is fill the gap. They found the economic gap of the mines that are no longer being used. They know the police, are no match. Are no match for them. I mean, they know if the police come on the scene, and they do. You find a couple of policemen coming on the scene. They're surrounded by Zamazamas with guns. They're completely outgunned in every sense of the word. And the thing that the Hume Scholes, who Michael was referring to, Hume Scholes is a mining lawyer, and he said it's actually very, very difficult to close these operations because they are run by sophisticated syndicates, like much else in this country. The Zamazamas themselves, he says, some of them are trafficked. It's that bad. It's probably very much like the construction industry.
Yeah. I've heard stories on that point that basically foreign people are brought into the country and they're smuggled in illegally. They're sent down the mine to work, and then they're essentially kept as almost slave labor there. They're not allowed to leave until they've paid off a debt, and they're then sold food at ridiculously high prices so that they remain in debt forever to essentially keep them as slaves. So I agree with you completely.
No, that's the point. It's not rough and not just rough and ready. It's very, very organized. And if they're transporting 25% of our gold we produce out of the country, it's very, very lucrative. So I don't think. In fact, Hume said that the only way to deal with the Zamazamas is to actually formally incorporate them. Each shaft or site to an existing formal mine.
This is exactly why this is exactly why the sort of cowboy we're going to go in with all the tactical units and do a sweep of the West Rand is going to be, if it does anything at all, it's going to last about 5 minutes. And it's the opposite of a sustainable solution. The other thing that concerns me about this issue is the rise of a kind of warlordism, vigilantism. So it's one thing to defend your property and community from attacks by criminal elements. It's another to proactively seek out these groups and attempt to destroy them and punish people sort of with like mob justice. And it looks like we've definitely seen elements of that already emerging here. Michael, any final thoughts on that point and on this topic in general?
I think a very great risk, and associated actually with the comment I've just seen in from one of our listeners, saying that this gives the ANC a convenient smokescreen to lead public conversation away from blaming the ANC for the breakdown of law and order. But of course, it also feeds into that whole xenophobic thing. It's blaming outsiders. Many of them are indeed, people from elsewhere. Apparently, I think perhaps Hume also mentioned this, that many of them are former miners, from frontline states or former frontline states. So it speaks to a kind of wider desperation, but people who know what they're doing, but forced into this informal mining, to put it in polite terms. So I think a very worrying thing all around, Nicholas. Green.
All right, let us move on to our next topic. And this is that, of course, tomorrow, there will not be a show tomorrow, is Women's Day, the 9th of August, in which we celebrate the contribution of South Africans women to the struggle against apartheid. And as usual, President Ramaphosa, he does a weekly newsletter, and his newsletter this week was about Women's Day. In his newsletter, President Cyril Ramaphosa said that strides have been made in achieving gender equality, but more needs to be done to fight gender-based violence. In South Africa today, he said, women enjoy the fundamental rights and freedoms that their grandmothers and great-grandmothers were denied. Today, women can advance in any occupation, study in a place and field of their choice, and their own businesses. Thanks to employment equity legislation and other policies of the Democratic government, women's representation in the workplace, in government and society continues to grow. In Parliament, 46% of National Assembly members are women, and 62% of the public service is made up of women. He went on to say, seeing black women occupy the highest echelons of society's ministers, judges, business leaders, engineers, and fighter pilots is an inspiration and encouragement to many who hope to follow their footsteps. But he warned that gender-based violence was a huge societal problem. He said, quote, this is not a problem of women, but a problem of men. And it is men who are called upon to be part of the solution, starting with their own attitudes and conduct. Sara, you have some thoughts about Women's Day. I know it's a particular bugbear of yours.
Well, let me ask first, Nick, do you know what a woman is?
Well, that's the question these days, and I think in South Africa that hasn't quite entered into our public conscious yet, that debate, but
it will.
Indeed.
It will. It will. No, I am a woman. My pronouns are she and her, for what it's worth. And that speech was probably written in about 2011, and he brings it out. He has a folder that says Women's Day, and every Women's Day he brings out this anodyne.
You just changed the
speech.
date.
He just changed the date, and I mean, I almost don't know what to say about it. I'm not a fan of Women's Day, and the reason I'm not a fan of Women's Day is it does commemorate a very distinctly historically important event, and that was the day in 1956 when women, a large group of women, marched on the union buildings to protest against past laws. It was hugely symbolic, and
I think it was specifically the extension of past laws to women, because up till that point,
that's right, because up to then it had only been men
from past laws.
It was a brave thing to do, to march in that way, and there's some very iconic photographs of it, and I think there is nothing wrong in our recognizing it annually as a representation of the role women played and the importance of women in society. What I object to is two things. One is having a public holiday. It doesn't have to be a public holiday. It can be Women's Day, as the International Women's Day is, which is a commemoration, and you can have commemorative events, but to have another public holiday where the economy is sort of hit over the head with losses is just ridiculous. It's a bit of a sop, we men will give you a Women's Day to make you feel better about yourselves, and also it's a kind of like recognizing the role of women in particularly in the historical context. We are half of the population. There are laws, we have rights that we should be pursuing. If men assist us, that's absolutely great, but it's not for Cyril and Gwedi Mantashe to sit there saying, have we checked the sort of number of parliamentarians lately? Are we on? That is my absolute worst. And I think this sort of day, it's patronizing, and I'm probably going to be, tarred and feathered for having said that I don't like the day. Not. It doesn't have to be a holiday. It doesn't do anything particularly. Every year you go through the same thing of interrupting a week, cutting down the economy. Hell, man, we're not a sort of interest group to be cosseted. We've got to fight for ourselves.
That tone is exactly what goes through this sort of thing. It's like, we've checked the box. This many women are in the thing, but you get that distinct impression that particularly within the ANC, there's a sort of, we all respect women and women must be leaders and all that, but really they can go and make the tea while the men will sit around and discuss things. And I don't know, maybe that's a little bit unfair, but I do feel it does seem that the ANC has a sort of, shall we say, patriarchal culture internally. And I think that they, once again, I mean, it's always funny on Women's Day. I remember that the ANC likes to take shots at the DA for being patriarchal organization or something. Unlike us, some organizations have like major female leaders and all over the place. Michael, you have also some thoughts on
It's sort of various things. I absolutely agree with Sara. It did strike me as kind of tragically ironic in a way that Ramaphosa referring to women enjoying rights and freedoms today, which they were denied. And of course, there are many that rights and freedoms that all people didn't have. And in that sense, he's correct. But it does seem tragic to me that women are especially prone in 2022 in terms of their freedom of movement, their access to economic opportunities, and not because they're denied them as women, but because society is denied these things. So the policy framework in which we're operating is so bad. And if there's one set of people, half of people in society, as Sara points out, who can really make a difference to the way society functions and thinks, the way kids grow up thinking and behaving, it's women, it's mothers, it's sisters, it's carers who have that role biologically, whether they like it or not. It is important, as Sara indicates, that we understand when we speak about women, we're talking about a particular kind of social experience, and it's does not in any way suggest that they are second class or greater or smaller. They are half of society, but there is this practical reality which is part of their experience, and that's the other thing that I always think about. We have this one day a year, but in fact, the thing that so often strikes me about women is that they're often the best qualified in society. They are often the cleverest. And I think of all my friends, I don't want to cast aspersions on my male friends, but I would say the women are particularly clever. I was lucky enough to grow up with very strong women, my mother, other women in the family, who gave me a very good example. And it was a kind of no nonsense, don't patronize, give us regard and respect that you'd give to anyone else, but nothing, absolutely nothing less than that. And when I look at society and look at the economy, I get this impression of conditions that are actually very hostile to the realities of how women grow up, become parents, make the absolutely vital and legitimate choices as adults, and suddenly they find themselves pushed out of the workplace or pushed out of the economy because the economy is structured in this very rigid way, and it really doesn't have to. We've discovered, I think, with the lockdown that we don't need to have 9-to-5 lives. We don't need to have offices and boardrooms that you've got to attend. You can quite easily look after your child or do something at home and be the CEO of a company. And so that's been my bugbear. I always think that as modern society, we are losing out on the massive investment that we make in teaching. In a way, I feel the cleverest half of society. All these millions of students who are committed, work hard, and just have so much to bring, and then they reach 25 and suddenly they drop out of the economy. So yeah, that's just something that I've always felt quite strongly about, and there's no reason why we can't reinvent the way the economy works.
So, of course, the other issue on Women's Day, one is that I think we've got a big problem with fatherlessness in South Africa, and that a lot of men are not contributing to raising healthy and stable children. And as many people in the live comments are pointing out, the just incredible amount of sexual violence, against both men and women, but particularly against women in South Africa, is, we have incredible levels of that. Sara, any final thoughts on this topic?
I'm glad you mentioned there were two issues that I think women do face that we've not got near solving. The one is the fatherlessness, the failure to take a responsibility for children. It ends up in the lap of so many women, and very young women, even virtually girls. And the other thing is gender-based violence. The problem is, you'll see criticism of the police for not doing enough, and certainly more structures, both formally and in the NGO sectors, must be established. But we're not actually dealing with the issue of why do men regard women in this way? We do, and that does mean two things. One, it's the very uncomfortable thing of looking at culture and looking back and seeing. I saw it all the time when I did disciplinary hearings at schools. You would see a young boy, he'd hit about the age of 14 or 15, in a female household with a couple of sisters and mother, and suddenly he was, from cultural exposure, he would deem himself to be the head of the household. The problem was that A, he wasn't old enough to be considered the head of the household. He didn't have the experience, and B, that his attitudes towards his mother and sisters became unpleasant because of this sense of superiority. Now, those are the things we've got to grapple with, and schooling and at school is a major source of grappling at them. The police and the social workers often have to come in afterwards, and that's the tragedy. They can't necessarily be blamed for. They can be blamed for poor policing, but they can't be blamed for the occurrence of gender-based violence. That is an issue for society as a whole to genuinely get to grips with and talk about seriously. Not because it shows anyone up, but because it's the situation women face in this country, as was pointed out at that meeting where Kelly got very upset and shouted, "Shut up, shut up, shut up," is that women literally can't walk from a taxi rank to home without the risk of being raped.
Exactly. All right, so we don't have a lot of time left, so we're going to quickly move on to our last topic, and this is about the enormous skills loss that Eskom is currently facing. So Eskom continues to bleed significant and critical skills. According to a report in News 24, more than 200 technically skilled people left the generation division between April and June this year, and something like 500 skilled workers have left all of Eskom with a combined experience of 13,000 years. So that's quite a lot of experience going down the drain in just over 3 months of this year. And there has been a lot of concern about this sudden huge lack of skills or draining of skills. However, the HR group executive, Lisa Pule, has said that this is all nonsense, that Eskom hasn't lost any skills because, in fact, it has, over the last 10 years, gained more people than lost in terms of number of people hired. And, of course, there's also a racial component to all of this. At a recent meeting, someone in the executive said that Eskom was in dire need of critical skills and that they should appoint white candidates where necessary to, quote, ensure continuity, performance, and sustainability in their areas of responsibility. And the HR executive, Pule, said, in response to this, I've had enough of the narrative that transformation is not successful and will not allow apartheid to come back. This 504 people who have left, 235 retired, 152 resigned, 29 died, and 14 were dismissed. 2 have apparently absconded, and 72 took separation packages. Even more concerning is that apparently Eskom's training pipeline is almost empty, and that there is almost no one new being trained to deal with their systems. Sara?
2 things. One is that we should all make sure we carry on trying to get off the grid, because obviously nothing is going to happen at Eskom anytime soon if this is the attitude towards skills. And the other one is, and I said it before the show, beware of human resources. There are people who lurk in human resources that are more destructive to the corporate sector than could possibly be imagined. I mean, she doesn't accept that you're looking at employing white people if they have the skills where it's necessary. If they're black people who have the skills, and that's fine too. And the other thing is, you're in trouble when you're invoking apartheid. You're on the rack. And all I can say is with HR like this, as I say, solar panels, gas heaters, get out there, get off the grid.
Michael, in 60 seconds, your thoughts.
Well, I think, we've just been talking about the rights and freedoms of women. If anything is going to make a contribution there, it's, solid, efficient electricity supply, and whoever supplies it, even if it's all men, is in fact what the government ought to be looking at. Just, forget about all the PC stuff and the appearances and so on. Just focus on what needs to be done.
Right, as the IRR's head of campaign said, Gabriel Krause said, let's not have white power, black power, let's just have electricity.
Exactly.
All right. And with that, we're going to call it to a close. Thank you very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please like us. Please leave us good reviews on the podcasts apps. And yeah, we will see you on Wednesday. Enjoy your Women's Day parade, whether you're a fan of Women's Day or not. Anyway, have a good one. Cheers.
One of you is going to be